Your news program every morning with up-to-the-minute news and extensive analysis of issues from Korea and abroad. This morning with Alex Jensen on TBS EFM.
Now then, several courts in Korea have begun to adopt this legal framework known as therapeutic jurisprudence. It's actually a legal philosophy focusing on providing treatment to people convicted of a crime so that they can heal, so that they can be treated as opposed to just being punished. It's not all crimes that fall under this method of justice, but particularly those involving the mentally ill, for example, and various other cases as well. This was all established in the United States, so let's learn more about where it started and where we might head with it here in Korea. Judge Ginger Lerner-Wren, County Court Judge in the Criminal Division of the 17th Judicial Circuit in Broward County of Florida, joins us on the line. Good morning from Seoul.
Hi, good morning, Alex, and to all your audience. It's such a privilege to be here.
Well, the privilege is ours, absolutely. So thank you for taking the time. Can you explain for us therapeutic jurisprudence? It sounds complicated. It's even quite difficult to say, but it's quite a simple theory.
It's so difficult to say, and I say that all the time. I agree with you. Therapeutic jurisprudence essentially is the study of the role of the law as a therapeutic agent, meaning, can courts heal? And this science really began by two wonderful law professors out of the University of Miami, and a partner from the University of Arizona, Professor Bruce Winnick, who passed away, unfortunately, sadly, a couple of years ago, and Professor David Wexler, who's carrying the torch. And it really began as a science, a scholarship, to help individuals with mental illnesses better go through a legal process that historically has been rather challenging and oftentimes anti-therapeutic.
So when is this usually applied? Is it pretty much solely in cases of mental health? Because I know there have been strong arguments made in cases of drug addiction and so on. And the question then is, where do you draw the line with mental health? Because you could argue addiction falls under that banner.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. Historically, this paradigm, this philosophy, began actually in the United States several decades ago. It began to be applied in Miami, Florida, in 1989 with the development of the first United States drug court, which offered treatment over punishment, and the philosophy of therapeutic jurisprudence began there. And so since then, problem-solving justice and those courts that have become so popular, not only in the United States, but globally, use the therapeutic justice model as a paradigm of justice that offers the opportunity to take the rule of law and intersect it with psychology, public health, behavioral health, across the continuum of, the rule of law, and offers a different lens of justice.
Can you give us an idea from your own experience, where you're having to hand out sentences, where you've applied this theory, turn it into practice?
Yes. First of all, I preside over two different courts. I preside over a traditional criminal court in the United States, which deals with relatively low-level crimes, meaning everything up to a year in jail. But by punishment, and I also, of course, established the first mental health court in the United States almost 20 years ago. And what's so interesting is that this law reform model of therapeutic jurisprudence carries over very nicely at times, into a traditional court process. In the mental health court in the United States and so many other parts of the world, still, mental illness is highly stigmatized. There's a great deal of prejudice, and just services and resources do not necessarily, get devoted to treat people with mental health disorders. And so many individuals end up getting arrested or institutionalized. And so the mental health court uses a therapeutic model in order to divert individuals out of treatment and into community services and recovery.
So what would a sentence look like? Community service doing what sort of thing?
Oh, in the mental health court, it's really, we don't call it a sentence. We call it a therapeutic court, and we use the court process to divert individuals out of an inappropriate system, such as a jail, back into linking with scarce resources in the community. So while you call it sentencing, we call it diversion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using that word so that we all understand really vaguely what we're talking about here, which is, a judge making a decision, which is a very difficult decision to make, because there's also suspicion, not just prejudice, but suspicion that maybe some people are faking their mental illness to be treated more leniently, or on the opposite side, going in the prejudice direction that there are some people who are beyond therapy. How do you balance those concerns?
I think that you're right in the sense, but on balance, problem-solving courts are really linked to understanding from a science and a public health perspective. We go to root cause. Problem-solving courts are really designed to address and respond to very vexing social problems which are global. And so to put on a therapeutic lens as a judge, I think offers a very different type of legal process, which of course has to adhere to the rule of law, but also, brings, to the court participants a very different kind of humanizing way of applying the law.
Now, talking about this in the cold light, it's very easy for me to ask this next question, because I want to enter a caveat there and say that if I or a loved one was the victim of crime, there is that sense of wanting justice. However, do we need to rethink the way we view punishment for all criminals? This, after all, should be about rehabilitation. There should be some element of therapy for everyone who falls foul of the law, shouldn't there?
Well, I just want to emphasize what you just said, Alex, because, victims' rights and public safety is always paramount. And so this really is, a very, very individualized, interesting, process of law reform. And judges and all lawyers and prosecutors, need to understand and be able to adhere to, all of these types of considerations and balance them. So public safety, victims' rights absolutely are priority.
Yeah.
But I think that you have to, then be able to, as you say, recognize that trauma, unresolved trauma in so many different, applications throughout the world. We are looking at, major, refugee crises and human trafficking and domestic violence and gun violence and, stigma, social stigma and prejudice. So the law does have now an avenue, a wonderful humanizing rehabilitative avenue through therapeutic jurisprudence to be able to have flexibility, to have, different ways of responding to these social problems.
Well, thank you very much for offering your perspective. We've obviously got a different framework, as every country will have its own cultural characteristics here in Korea, but to learn from the US in this respect and take it forward and find ways to help heal criminals, especially those who have been traumatized in the past or whatever has led them into their mental illness, it does sound like an enlightening step forward. Judge Ginger Lerner-Wren, thank you.
Thank you so much for the privilege of being on your show.
Our pleasure. And we welcome further feedback on this. Text us #1013 for 51 per message or email efmthismorning@gmail.com.